I never imagined that one simple trust could carry so much weight, or that losing it could feel like my entire world had shifted in an instant. Everything had seemed perfect, or at least as perfect as I could imagine. We had our routines, our little jokes, our quiet world that felt untouchable. I trusted him completely. He was charming, attentive, the kind of person you believe could never betray you. But life has a way of showing you its true colors, and sometimes it's in the smallest, quietest moments that the most profound truths are revealed. For months I had ignored subtle signs. The late-night messages he brushed off as work-related, the unexplained absences, the slight hesitations when he talked about friends or his day. I convinced myself it was paranoia. I told myself that people are complicated, that maybe I was overreacting, that love sometimes means trusting blindly. But there's a point when ignoring reality stops being an option, and that day came unexpectedly. I remember walking in one evening, the house unusually quiet, and seeing his phone light up on the counter. Something in my chest tightened as I reached for it, almost without thinking. That's when I saw it, the messages he thought I'd never discover. My heart froze, and everything I thought I knew about him, about us, shattered in a single moment. Betrayal doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it hits harder than you could ever imagine. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it, hands trembling. How could someone I loved so deeply, someone I trusted completely, deceive me so effortlessly? For hours I replayed memories, searching for clues I had missed. And there they were, hidden in plain sight, the tiny signs, the inconsistencies, the subtle lies that I had brushed aside. All the while I realized that I had a choice. I could let this destroy me, or I could turn it into something that reclaimed my dignity and my power. That night I confronted him, my voice trembling, my heart heavy with betrayal. His excuses were weak, his lies transparent. And yet the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was the casual way he dismissed it, as if I was overreacting, as if my trust and love didn't matter. I cried, of course. But beneath those tears a spark ignited, a quiet fire of determination. Betrayal has a way of awakening something inside you, a clarity and focus you didn't know existed. And that clarity became the foundation for what was to come. I knew I couldn't act blindly. Revenge isn't about blind anger, it's about strategy, about timing, about precision. I had to understand every secret, every lie, every corner of his deception. So I began observing carefully, noting his routines, his habits, the subtle details that he thought were invisible. Every lie, every omission, every gesture of duplicity became a piece of the puzzle. I was patient, I was methodical, and slowly the picture became clear. It wasn't easy. Some nights exhaustion and doubt made me question myself, but the more I uncovered, the more I understood the magnitude of what had been hidden from me. By the end of the week I had a full account of every lie, every misdirection, every secret kept from me. And with that clarity came a plan, not a plan of malice, but a plan of justice. I was going to make him face the consequences of his betrayal in a way that was undeniable and precise. When the moment arrived to confront him again, I was calm, collected, and ready. I didn't plead or beg, I let him speak, let him try to maintain control while I quietly held the truth in my hands, and then slowly I revealed everything. Each message, each hidden detail, each betrayal laid bare. I watched as his confident mask faltered, as panic flickered across his face. I didn't need to shout. The truth spoke for itself, and in that silence there was power. Not cruel power, but the kind that restores balance. As I exposed the truth, the people around us began to see him as he really was. Shock, disbelief, and finally acknowledgement. He tried to spin it, tried to manipulate the story, but the evidence left no room for lies. Each careful record I had kept, each subtle observation became undeniable proof. I realized then that justice doesn't need loud gestures. It needs patience, strategy, and the courage to let the truth unfold naturally. After the storm passed, life began to feel different. I felt stronger, sharper, more aware of my own boundaries and worth. The betrayal that had tried to destroy me instead rebuilt me. Friends who had doubted me now acknowledged the clarity I had gained. People who had overlooked the signs could no longer deny the truth. And for the first time I felt free. Free from deception, free from the weight of betrayal, free to reclaim my life fully. Reflecting on it now, I see that trust is fragile but clarity is powerful. Betrayal, though painful, is a lesson in disguise. It teaches you about patience, observation, and the strength within yourself. I learned that anger can be useful, but only if it's guided by strategy and purpose. I learned that exposing truth is not cruelty, it's justice. Most importantly, I learned that I am stronger than I ever imagined, capable of transforming heartbreak into clarity, power, and freedom. If there is one thing I hope anyone listening takes away from this story, it is this. Betrayal will hurt, it will leave scars, but how you respond defines you. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it reveal your strength. I chose strength. I chose truth. And in the end, that choice gave me something far more valuable than revenge. It gave me freedom. Those who betray will face consequences, often in ways they never expect. Those who stay true to themselves will emerge stronger, wiser, and unshakable. After that night, I found myself looking at the world differently. Every conversation, every interaction, even casual moments carried more weight. I began noticing subtleties I had overlooked before, the way people spoke when they thought no one was listening, the small gestures that revealed intentions, the tiny cracks in facades. It was a strange awakening. Betrayal had forced me to see clearly, to pay attention, and to trust not only my instincts but also my ability to navigate truth. I realized that the world is full of hidden motives, and being aware doesn't make you cynical, it makes you prepared. I began reflecting on the relationship itself. What had drawn me in, what had kept me blind, and what had made the betrayal so powerful. I realized it wasn't just about him. It was about my desire to trust, my willingness to see the good in someone even when small signs suggested otherwise. That vulnerability had made the deception possible, but it had also made me human. And being human doesn't mean being weak, it means learning, growing, and finding strength in the aftermath. I allowed myself to feel the sadness fully, to mourn the loss of the illusion. And yet I did not allow it to define me. Days passed and I found myself reclaiming pieces of my life I hadn't realized I had surrendered. I spent time on passions and hobbies I had set aside, reconnecting with friends I had neglected, and rediscovering the joy in small, simple things. I was careful, though. I didn't trust blindly anymore. Trust had to be earned, not given. Every relationship I had going forward would be built on honesty, clarity, and mutual respect. The betrayal had taught me that strength comes not only from facing deceit, but from creating a life where deceit cannot easily take root. As I rebuilt, I also observed the ripple effects of my actions. People who had once admired him began to see me differently. They were drawn not to the drama, but to the calm clarity I exhibited, the way I had allowed truth to prevail without descending into vindictiveness. There was a strange beauty in that power. It wasn't the kind you flaunt, it was the quiet, unshakable strength that commands respect without demanding it. I realized that exposure of deception isn't about humiliation, it's about restoration. Restoring dignity, restoring balance, and restoring the natural order of truth. I also began thinking about forgiveness, not for him but for myself. I had carried anger, frustration, and heartbreak for so long, and releasing them wasn't surrendering power. It was reclaiming it. I understood that holding on to resentment would have anchored me to the past, but embracing clarity allowed me to move forward. There is a freedom in knowing the truth and letting it guide your next steps, in building a life where honesty and awareness protect you from deception. Through it all, I noticed something remarkable. Betrayal sharpens your instincts in ways nothing else can. I began seeing patterns of behavior in people around me, noticing when someone was dishonest or manipulative before it could harm me. That awareness became a shield, a tool I could use to navigate life more safely and confidently. The lessons I had learned were no longer theoretical. They were embedded in the way I walked, spoke, and interacted. My confidence grew quietly but unmistakably, and I felt a sense of control I had never had before. Even as life returned to a semblance of normalcy, the memory of betrayal lingered, not as a wound but as a teacher. I reflected on the moments when I had been blind, the times when I had ignored intuition, and the times when I had been willing to accept surface-level charm instead of seeking truth. Those reflections weren't regrets, they were the foundation of wisdom. I understood that experiences, even painful ones, have a purpose. They prepare you, shape you, and reveal strengths you didn't know you possessed. I also began noticing how deception affects more than just the person deceived. Others who had been caught up in the lies, friends, family, colleagues, had to adjust to reconcile what they believed with what was real. I realized that exposing the truth wasn't just about personal closure, it was about restoring clarity for everyone involved. By acting with patience, precision, and integrity, I could ensure that justice was not a spectacle, but a natural, undeniable result of honesty prevailing. There were moments of temptation, of course. Moments when anger bubbled, when the desire to lash out or humiliate felt strong. But I resisted. I understood that my goal wasn't to destroy, but to reveal, to reclaim, and to protect myself. Revenge in its raw form often traps you in the same cycle as the person who hurt you. Instead, I let strategy, observation, and patience guide me. That way, the consequences of betrayal would unfold naturally, leaving no room for manipulation or denial. I also reflected on how betrayal had changed my perception of love and trust. I realized that love doesn't require blind faith. Trust doesn't mean ignoring warning signs. And relationships thrive not on illusions but on honesty, respect, and accountability. I vowed to myself that moving forward, my connections would be rooted in these truths. And in that commitment, I found a quiet sense of empowerment. The knowledge that I would not be deceived again, that I could see clearly, and that my boundaries were stronger than ever. Even in the quiet moments, the lessons continued. I observed how people interact in everyday life, how small gestures can carry immense meaning, and how subtle honesty or deception shapes outcomes. I saw the beauty in truth, the strength in integrity, and the satisfaction of acting with clarity and patience. Betrayal had given me a lens to see the world more clearly, not cynically, but wisely. I had gained insight, resilience, and a newfound appreciation for the power of awareness. Looking back, I realize now that betrayal, as painful as it is often a gift in disguise. It forces you to confront reality, to face uncomfortable truths, and to build strength you didn't know you had. I learned that patience, careful observation, and integrity are more powerful than anger and impulsive action. I discovered that true empowerment comes from reclaiming your own life, your voice, and your clarity. And most importantly, I learned that the human spirit can endure, adapt, and emerge stronger after the deepest betrayals. As weeks turned into months, life settled into a new rhythm, yet the lessons from betrayal remained vivid. I had learned to notice subtle shifts in behavior, to listen to my instincts, and to value clarity above comfort. Every interaction, every relationship carried new meaning. I understood that trust isn't given lightly, but when paired with discernment and awareness, it can flourish without leaving you vulnerable to deception. I began living deliberately, making choices that reflected both wisdom and self-respect. I also reflected on the nature of forgiveness, not for him but for myself. I realized that carrying anger and resentment would only anchor me to the pain. Forgiveness didn't mean excusing what happened, it meant freeing myself from its hold. Each time I let go of bitterness, I felt lighter, more capable, more at peace. It was a revelation. True empowerment comes not from retaliation, but from reclaiming your own life and your own emotions. In that space of calm clarity, I discovered a strength I hadn't known existed. I began reconnecting with parts of myself I had neglected. Hobbies, passions, friendships, small joys I had set aside in the haze of trust and love became sources of restoration. I embraced moments of quiet reflection and solitude. They were not empty, they were rich with the process of rebuilding. I understood that healing is gradual and that reclaiming your life after betrayal requires patience. But it is also deeply rewarding. Every step forward, however small, was a victory over the deception that had once threatened to consume me. Observing others also became enlightening. I began seeing how subtle gestures and words reveal intentions, how small inconsistencies can hint at hidden truths, and how honesty resonates even when unspoken. My awareness had sharpened, but it wasn't fear that guided me, it was wisdom. I learned to navigate life with a quiet confidence, a sense of preparedness that made me resilient without hardening my heart. In this way, betrayal became a teacher, one that revealed both the fragility of trust and the power of discernment. I also found myself thinking deeply about the choices that led to the betrayal. It wasn't just his actions that mattered, but mine as well. I had allowed my desire to believe in him to cloud my judgment. I had ignored signs, brushed aside intuition, and placed comfort above caution. And while that had made me vulnerable, it also taught me an invaluable lesson, that awareness and self-respect are the foundations of healthy relationships. From now on, I would approach love, friendship, and trust with eyes wide open, with courage and with clarity. Even in casual interactions, I noticed the ripple effects of honesty. People responded to my calm confidence and clarity, often unconsciously. They respected the way I had handled betrayal, the way I had allowed truth to prevail without malice. And I realized that the lessons I had learned extended beyond my personal life. They applied to work, to friendships, to family. They were universal truths about integrity, awareness, and resilience. The experience had expanded my perspective and strengthened my resolve. I found myself revisiting memories, not to dwell but to understand. Moments that once seemed insignificant now held meaning. Every gesture, every word, every subtle omission became part of a larger pattern. And in recognizing that pattern, I gained insight not just about him, but about human behavior in general. It was empowering to see clearly, to understand motives, and to navigate life with heightened perception. I was no longer naive. I was alert, confident, and prepared to protect my heart without closing it off entirely. There were also moments of reflection on the nature of truth. I realized that exposing deception doesn't require drama, it doesn't need to humiliate or punish. Truth, when presented carefully and with patience, has a quiet power that commands respect. People recognize it instinctively, even if they had been deceived. And I understood that by holding on to clarity, by letting patience and strategy guide my actions, I could achieve justice in its purest, most effective form. Over time, I began to notice the personal growth that had emerged from the pain. I was calmer, more self-assured, more aware of my boundaries and more attuned to my own needs. The betrayal had forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, but it had also shown me the depth of my resilience. I had survived, adapted, and emerged stronger, and that realization was liberating. It reminded me that strength is not about avoiding pain, but about navigating it with wisdom and grace. As life continued, I also began to mentor and guide others, sharing insights I had gained from my experience. People who had faced similar betrayals reached out, seeking perspective, understanding, or simply a voice that had been through the storm. I found purpose in these interactions, realizing that my journey could inspire others to reclaim their own power. The lessons of betrayal, exposure, and personal resilience became a way to help others navigate their own challenges, offering guidance without judgment, support without enabling harm. Finally, I reflected on the most important lesson of all, that life continues and that every setback, every deception, every heartbreak carries within it the potential for growth. Betrayal had been painful, yes, but it had also been transformative. It had awakened in me clarity, courage, and resilience. It had taught me the value of patience, the importance of observation, and the strength inherent in truth. And most importantly, it had reminded me that I am capable of facing the darkest moments and emerging stronger, wiser, and unshakable. In the end, I realized that betrayal is not just an ending, it is also a beginning. It forces reflection, demands awareness, and challenges us to grow. And when we meet that challenge, when we rise above the pain, the result is freedom. Freedom from lies, freedom from manipulation, freedom to live authentically, with dignity and clarity. I had chosen strength over despair, truth over illusion, and in doing so I had reclaimed my life entirely.